So those are the nuts and bolts. Let's get into it. The gang is all here. It's a tradition here at KCTV5. We've got Jared Kohler in studio. We have Neil Jones and Marlia Campbell in Lawrence. Neil, I'll start with you. What was the reaction like at Kansas when the brackets came out, and what is your reaction to the first round matchup and the path to the Sweet 16 and maybe beyond?
Everybody in the media was complaining about the fact it's going to be very expensive for the media to get to Salt Lake City, but also for fans. And they basically understood why. Kansas didn't hold up their end of the bargain. They didn't take care of business. And then I started looking at Samford. What a great coach. Buckyball. They average 86 points a game. This guy was coaching high school basketball, a legend in the state of Alabama. They hire him and get him a chance at Samford. And for the last 3 years, he wins 2 conference regular season championships. This year when they win the tournament and they're in the big dance.
Yeah, Neil, you mentioned the team playing in Salt Lake City. Bill Self was asked today, hey, you're used to playing a little bit closer to home. Omaha, Des Moines, he said, yeah, well, we've been higher seeded in the past. We're sitting at the 4 seed right now, and they have a really good Samford team. And my first reaction looking at this was similar to what Self led with, which is this is a matchup that kind of strikes an Achilles heel with Kansas in the fact that Samford shoots 39% from 3 as a team. The top 3 leading scorers are all in the mid-40s, the highest being 47%. This KU team has struggled defending from beyond the arc and matching that tick for tack on the other end. They're going through a team-wide shooting slump. And again, Samford, one of the top 3-point shooting teams in this side of the bracket. That's going to be interesting to see how they match up. Because again, at this last stretch of the conference season, that's been kind of a weakness for Bill Self's squad.
I'm hearing all this gloom and doom from KU fans, understandably so. They're stumbling down the stretch. But guys, I feel like we were just here. I know it's a different sport, and so I'm not saying, hey, the Jayhawks are going to make a Final Four run or that you should be confident in one. But we were just here with the Chiefs, who were inconsistent throughout the entire regular season, and we learned that the regular season doesn't matter. And when it comes to March, we've seen a lot of KU teams that are really good in the regular season that stumble in March, and then the ones that least expect it. The 2022 team really struggled at times in February. They flipped the switch. All that matters is that on Thursday, on Saturday in the Sweet 16, is KU going to wake up on the right side of the bed, and instead of hitting, 3 3-pointers like they have earlier this year, maybe they can hit 5. Is that crazy to think? I don't think so, especially when you got Bill Self on the sideline. It's like having Andy Reid on the sideline. He's always going to be the best coach on the floor. It's why I think Jayhawk fans should be a little bit more confident than they are right now. I think it's just because KU's used to rolling in as a 1 or 2 seed, and they're not this year, Scott.
Yeah, I don't think KU making 5 threes is crazy, but I think you got to look at the other side of the floor. You've got to look at Samford, not only shooting 49% from the field, but also proficient from downtown. KU needs to keep the other guy in single digits in 3-point baskets, and I think that's going to be a big part of it on the defensive side. Look, Kansas defensively is really good. They hold opponents to, I think, under 41% shooting on the season. So it's really just a question of whether the offense shows up, and that obviously leads us to the next topic at hand, Neil Jones, and I'll let you chime in on this. Kansas needs to be healthy. I mean, this is the storyline to end all storylines in terms of the Jayhawks. If they have a 100% Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullough, yeah, they can play with anybody. I don't think they're going to have a 100% either guy. The question is, and obviously we don't know the answer, how close to 100% will they be? Can this patchwork lineup with 2 stars who are not feeling it be able to just slog their way through this first round game and then worry about, a potential matchup with either McNeese or Gonzaga next Saturday?
Look, let's cut to the chase. There is no way Bucknell is going. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought up Bucknell. There's no way Samford is going to be upset. Look, we understand upsets happen, and it could happen here if the Jayhawks play like a D- game. Samford's a good team. They have a lot of fun. They love their coach. He's a special guy. He's a winner. His guys really believe in him. But Scott, this is a team that played Purdue right out of the gate, a #1 seed, and got beat like 98-45. Defense can thwart offense, and I think that's what Kansas is counting on. That's what Bill Self said. He goes, look, if you play great defense, you don't have to make as many shots.
Yeah, and Neil, that Purdue team, the first game of the season, is the only top 25 team Samford has played all season long. So certainly when you look at strength of schedule and just the adversity, I guess, teams have had to go through, Kansas clear winner on that one. If you look at the rings behind me, that is just a picture of how successful KU has been. They've been to this tournament for a very long time, the longest active streak in NCAA basketball right now. Samford hasn't been in 24 years. You mentioned their coach, a former high school guy, recently 4 years ago coaching high school basketball. They're the 14 seed. They're playing with house money. This is a team that's going to come out firing from deep. They're excited to be here. But Scott, to your point on Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dickinson, that is going to be massive. Not just are they available to go, which it sounds like they will be playing. How healthy are they? You know, we saw Hunter Dickinson's shoulder issue. Kevin's been dealing with that knee all year. Bill Self said today, I can't remember having two All-Americans down like this at once. That's a big red flag to watch here going into Utah.
It surprised me that Bill Self actually said he's more confident in what he has in Hunter Dickinson, who's already kind of been practicing. Kevin McCullough's the guy that has been more laid off. But McCullough did play just a couple weeks ago against Baylor, played 30-plus minutes and played really well. I think it's just a matter of playing through some pain, but we've seen him be good even with this injury, maybe not November level good. Dickinson, though, if Self is confident in him, then listen, we're talking about a starting five here with two All-Americans, a point guard that you won the national championship with, one of the best defenders in the country who also played on a national title team, and then a freshman who the sky's the limit. He's kind of struggled of late. I don't have high expectations for Johnny Furphy, but you don't need him to be an All-American. I think this starting five is really, really strong. We saw them pull off big wins earlier in the year without the depth that everybody says Kansas needs. Well, they didn't need the depth when they beat Kentucky, Tennessee, UConn, TCU, Houston, Baylor, Texas. KU has beaten 8 tournament teams, 5 of which are top 3 seeds in the tournament. I know it happened a couple months ago, but they still count, and I think that is still a possibility. I'm not predicting it, but to act like, oh, there's no chance they can do it, that's foolish.
Seems like a long, long time ago. And look, they've lost 7 of 14. I mean, that's a fact. And some of those games were with a healthy starting five. Can Kansas beat anybody? Yeah, I already mentioned that. I understand the concern because we all fall victim, I think, to the recency bias. But yeah, when this starting five is on the floor and they're clicking, sure, this is a dynamic basketball team. And yes, I'll say it again, they can beat anybody. Now, to your point about Johnny Furphy, no, they don't need him to be an All-American. They do, however, need him to hit some shots, which he has not done the last 3 weeks. February, Furphy, 12 points a game. March, Furphy, 6 points a game. We need to at least split the difference on that. He has to be a complementary offensive piece, especially if 1A and 1B are not functioning at full capacity. And as for the injuries, I mean, Hunter Dickinson, you could make the argument, Jared, you talk about maybe being surprised that he's the better of the two right now. With the shoulder, you pop it back in. As long as it doesn't pop out again, I think he'll be okay. McCullough's knee, this has been a thing for weeks and months, and it's a bone bruise, but it's just not getting clearly that much better. So hopefully you get the guy who we saw against Baylor and not the guy who we saw against Oklahoma who went like 3 for 14 from the field. All right, guys, let's big picture this thing. Let's open up the bracket and do what the team can't do, and that's look past Samford to I think, an overseeded Gonzaga team at 5. Everybody's going to be picking the 12 seed McNeese to beat the Zags. And then if you win that next round game, you get possibly the number 1 seed Purdue in the Sweet 16. So without getting too far ahead of ourselves, Neil, what do you think about this bracket as a whole?
Over the years, we have learned not to look at the bracket too much because so many upsets can happen. The team you're looking at the second weekend might be erased. We've seen it happen to Kansas. They got erased. We've also seen it happen a lot of times over the years. The team ahead of them gets erased. So, Scott, I don't put a lot of stock in that. But I will say this. I think Kansas has the firepower to reach the Sweet 16 without playing their best basketball. After that, it's going to need to be all hands on deck, and they're going to have to play better basketball. Scott, I have a question for you. Did you burst into tears when you thought they said Stanford, your alma mater, instead of Sanford?
I was relatively certain, Neil, they did not include the letter T in Samford when they announced it, but thank you for caring. I appreciate that. Marlia, what are your thoughts on this bracket? Which, I mean, honestly, if you look at this empirically, Purdue, everybody's down on Purdue as a 1 seed. Okay, fine. Tennessee showed some warts the last couple of weeks as a 2 seed. Creighton as a 3, I don't think is scaring the bejeebers out of anybody. And then Kansas is a 4 seed that sort of limped into this thing. So I would imagine the national narrative is, wow, the Midwest region, that's the most wide open region we have.
Yeah, Bill Self mentioned it at the top of his press conference today. He said, everyone's going to say this, but I'm saying it. We got a tough draw, and I think they did. When I'm filling out my bracket, my favorite upset to pick is the 12-5. I'm looking at that one next. I think Gonzaga certainly has a shot to take down McNeese. Obviously, the numbers favorite going into this one. They had big wins over Kentucky and St. Mary's earlier this season. But McNeese State is looking good as well. So we could be seeing a KU McNeese State in round 2, which I'd be interested about. You look farther down the road, Purdue is very, very good. They're going to be a tough team to get past to move on to the Final Four. But as long as McCullough and Dickinson are healthy, not just healthy on the court, but healthy and contributing and feeling well. Because, guys, you mentioned the recency bias. It matters how you're playing at this point of the year. The January wins, those aren't as much on the back of your mind when you're this team. You think about how you played in the Big 12 tournament. You think about how you were playing the stretch into March, going into February. That matters. And right now, KU's on a little bit of shaky ground. Yes, it has a lot to do with injury, but they're in a shooting slump as a team and individually, and there's definitely some confidence issues. So it's going to be interesting to see how they show up.
Jared's going to go back to the flip the switch argument. Right?
Listen, because here's the thing we haven't brought up is the fact that we're talking about Kansas. They've played in big games. They're used to these moments playing in these neutral site crowds with seasons on the line. A team like McNeese State hasn't really. Purdue chokes every single year. I think Kansas as an underdog against the Boilermakers when you've got Hunter Dickinson, Kevin McCullough's played in a Final Four, DeJuan Harris has played in a national championship. When you have Bill Self on the sideline, Matt Painter's like, oh my gosh, I can't lose again. Whereas Bill Self is playing with house money. We got to keep in mind that there's a reason Kansas makes these runs in March because they're not as scared of the bright stage as a lot of teams are. And I think this bracket is a pretty nice draw for Kansas when you think, hey, they're not playing a 12 in Grand Canyon, that I think was even better draw. Purdue, I don't think is that scary, especially when you have Hunter Dickinson as a fellow 7-footer that can go up against Zach Edey. Tennessee, Creighton, if you get there. But then we're talking about the Elite Eight. And Scott, you would take an Elite Eight trip right now if you're the Kansas team with the way you've limped down the stretch. We've seen year in and year out, it's not always the best teams that make these tournament runs. It's can you get a little lucky with the draw? And 2022 kind of opened up for Kansas. Last year, a good Arkansas team, potentially UConn the next round. I think this year, there's a chance it could open up for KU.
Yeah, and look, I would take an Elite Eight. If you offered it to me right now, I would take that deal. I think a lot of Jayhawk fans probably would. And look, with a healthy Hunter Dickinson, Kansas does match up against Purdue and Zach Edey probably as well as anybody. So if it comes to that, and if we get chalk or rock chalk, as it were, into that Sweet 16, maybe we'll see if that come to fruition. I think Purdue's going to have its hand full in the second round because nobody, these 8-9 games, nobody's easy. And a Utah State, TCU, either one of those teams is capable of knocking off Purdue. All right, Neil, final question, and it's one that goes back to what we talked about a year ago at this time, which is, man, no Bill Self. How's that going to affect Kansas in the tournament? Well, Bill Self is back. Bill Self is really happy to be back. I think he probably has a renewed appreciation for March Madness and being in the chair, coaching on the sideline. How much of a difference does Bill Self make as an X factor heading into this tournament?
We've all lived our lives when our dad was gone or our mom, whoever the disciplinarian was, whoever the leader of the family was, they're gone. So you can run around and you can stay out late and your mom's asleep and you're doing all this stuff and the dad comes home or your mom comes home, you get in trouble. There's no question that this team feels more stable with having their head coach. I have to believe the Hall of Famer would have made the difference of at least 2 points last year against Arkansas. But guys, I do want to say, there's been something bugging me the last 3 days since Kansas lost, and that is this reminds me so much of Kansas in 2005, Bill Self's second team. He had this great group that was left over. They'd been to 2 Final Fours. The core had been to 2 Final Fours under Roy Williams. They go to the Sweet 16 and get knocked off over in St. Louis, Bill's first year. Then the next year, they come into the league with a great team, but they were sick. They had the flu. They had like 3 guys, 3 key players not feeling well. Their best player had a sore ankle, and they got upset by Bucknell. Everybody remembers that. I'm just saying it can happen. That's why it's important that Kansas play a pretty decent game. They play good defense, and they take care of business and put these teams away early. Don't let them hang around and get it done. Then we can be talking about the bracket opening up and them going all the way.
Yeah, Neil, well, you mentioned mentioned the impact that Bill Self has on this team, being on the bench. I think it's unparalleled. I mean, you can't put into words how critical it is for Bill Self to be leading this team. And again, you look at the wall behind me, you think about all the championships. There's something to be said about the pedigree of winning. Of course, underdogs come into this firing from all cylinders. They're excited to be there. This Bill Self team and KU as a program historically knows what it takes in the month of March. Bill Self knows how to get it done. We've referenced the Chiefs. Jared, earlier in the show, you compared him to Andy Reid. He's just kind of one of those guys where it gets to this point of the year and he has a couple tricks up his sleeves that we haven't seen yet. So with a healthy team, I think this team has a really good chance of going deep.
I will not bet against him, but I think it's also a good example of how fluky March is. Bill Self is the best coach in college basketball right now, and he's won it all twice over a long time here at Kansas. That's how hard it is to actually make a tournament run. The fact that KU's made it 34 straight years, the fact that they've gone 17 years since losing the first round, back-to-back years, Bucknell and Bradley, that's impressive. We've seen a lot of great coaches like John Calipari stumble along the way. So the fact that Bill Self has been this successful in March is not the norm. And so the fact that, if they get upset in the second round, yes, that's disappointment for Kansas, but it's just really fluky. It's a matter, on that day, are you healthy? Are you waking up on the right side of bed to make that fluky three-pointer? Do you get the roll of the bounce? DeJuan Harris got hurt late in the second half of the Arkansas game last year. Can they stay healthy? Can they stay in, Scott? I love this starting five for Kansas, but if they get in foul trouble, it's over.
Yes.
So that's the thing. Can you get a beneficial whistle? Yeah. All these things are very fluky, that it's why it's kind of hard to judge March. You just roll the ball out there and take what you can.
And this is why we had no top three seeds in the Final Four a year ago. And this is why nobody has won that gazillion dollars that everybody promises for the perfect bracket.
This is my year,
Warren
Scott.
The Warren Buffett
year.
billion. It's just Jared or bust. So yeah, look, this is why it's fun. We love upsets, just not this 4-13 upset next Thursday. Guys, great job, and can't wait to see how it all unfolds.